what a treat for me to be here tonight and be home. Hi, Mom. See everyone that I know and some that I don't. And I don't believe anyone here could be more surprised for me to be standing before you as a mother of 5 and now a writer. I'm a musician, and I didn't even like kids. I'll be honest. I was not one who was dying to have children, and could quite well envision my life without ever doing that. For those of you who don't know me, I'll just give you the nickel tour. I grew up in Palo Alto as one of 4 kids of Orville and Monajo. And my dad was a scientist, and my mother was a therapist, and had a master's degree in child development. I'd never been hit. I was never hungry. I'd never heard of foster care, and why would I? I was told that I was on this earth to fulfill the nature of my design, to experience joy, and I was given the education and the opportunities to make that happen. As a musician, I came to a point in my playing life where I felt that to come closer to this art form that I love so much, it wasn't enough what I was doing. I felt like I'd learned how to play my instrument, and I was playing in the groups I want. I'd done everything I wanted to do career-wise, and yet I wanted to be closer to music. And I wanted not just to play it, but I wanted to sort of live it. And my friends and colleagues were just like, girl, what are you doing? You're throwing it under the bus in adopting 5 special needs kids. And I saw where they were going with that. And of course, from the outside, that's what it looks like. But for the inside, as a musician, it was the most musical thing I've ever done. There is a form in music, sonata form. It's the most common. And it's an ABA form. It begins with a statement, and then it goes into a development section, and then there's a return to the original statement. The first statement is called the exposition, and it's generally in a major key, and it's beautiful and thematic. The development section is takes you into harmonic instability. It disrupts this beautiful exposition, and new material is entered in, and we don't know what's going to happen next, and there's tension all around the development section. And then at the end, we come back and we repeat the opening theme, but we hear it differently because we've been changed. And there are small changes as well in the return to that. I had never had a development section in my life. I had fantastic health. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for that. Never been sick. I mean, my grandparents passed away, but long life, and it was a beautiful celebration and happened as it should, family around. No one close to me had died. I had not felt ever lost or bankrupt morally or financially. I'd never feared for my life. I'd never been unstable. And I was looking forward to my life, and I could see what I was doing 10 years from then as a horn player and as a musician. And I thought, you know, there's a lot of options here. You know, I could start traveling, whatever. It was sort of a reverse Thoreau. It was a reverse Walden Pond. I wanted to know about life in a way that I hadn't experienced before. I was looking for transformation in my own self. And as my husband and I decided to adopt these kids, the closer we got to it, I realized, this is fantastic. That my development section, the instability of me destabilizing a very stable life, to create a stable exposition for these children who'd had a rough start just felt like pure poetry. And it's a difficult path we took. It was hard. If you read the book, you'll see that it was very hard. And as my husband points out, yeah, harder for them. The book is dealing with very difficult subjects of early trauma. And I felt like I was living actually emotionally the range of these kids, their experiences, and as I got to know them and love them, it was like, I don't know, it was like living in a Dostoevsky novel. I had never felt so much, such a range of emotion at such intense levels. So this book is about the first 3.5 years, which was kind of the primary transition of us coming from strangers and trying to form a family. And it's a love story. My younger sister Michelle likes to call it a horror love story. And she chose a title for this book. She wanted it to be called Extreme Parenting because her husband's a rock climber. They live in Boulder, and a lot of her friends, they just sit around and talk about extreme this, extreme sports, you know, base jumping and all this. Michelle came to visit us. She went home and was hanging out at a party with rock climbers and free climbs. And she said to these people, they're extreme. She said, no. My sister just adopted 5 kids through foster care. You got nothing. So, and while I'm on this subject of the title, I'd just like to say this title, the publisher chose this. And when they came up with it, I asked, have you actually read the book? Because I see here the inspiring true story of how an absolutely crazy idea led to one very big happy family. We adopted 5 special needs kids. And I said, well, I can't even come up with an acronym for that. I called the title Short Story Long. But they said the market is saturated. It's for marketing. And every word in there can be searched, which I think was kind of interesting. But it also made me think about what that crazy idea was. And I actually called the editor, like, I don't recall like having that be a premise, like a statement in the book. What is that crazy idea? Is it giving to someone else? Because that should not be under the heading of crazy. But I think that's what it was. My husband and I got married just before 9/11. He was an FBI agent, and we were separated within weeks for the first 2 years of our marriage. I would go and visit him. The bureau was difficult. The hours were very long. I could visit him then, but then he went back into the Marine Corps. And after that was done, and we came back together, it took us a while to sort of get to know each other again. And we decided, we started talking about having a family and what that would look like. I was 40 and fine with it. I mean, like I said, I'd never felt strongly about having my own children. But we agreed that having a family was what it was about at our age, and a second marriage for both of us, was about giving something to someone else. And once we got past that and the reproductive imperative, we realized that the need was already there. We didn't have to, if we wanted to give something to someone, if that's what it was, that the need was already out there. So it sounds crazy. We started with 2 kids, and quickly after we got them, they started advocating for these younger 3 that had been raised with them in the same foster home. They were not biologically related. It was a beautiful thing to see that a sibling bond is not necessarily biological, or as a parent bond. It doesn't have to be that. I grew up in a very tight biological home. My siblings are my best friends, and I just decided to go for it. As my brother would say, well, Ann, if you're gonna do it, overdo it, which we did. And the night before we actually took on the additional 3, and brought them into our tiny midtown apartment in Manhattan. My husband leaned over and he said, can we really do this? And I was like, oh yeah, we are so doing this. I said it out loud, and then to my voice, my inside voice, I was like, all right, you're a classical musician and traditionally self-absorbed. How is it that you think you can do this? I knew I could do it. I knew it was the right thing to do, and there was enormous energy that came to me throughout our whole parenting career, which is still we're in the tail end of it, in knowing that I was doing the right thing for these children and for myself and for our family. All right, love, limits, and laughter. There's a lot that this book covers. My partner, Dave, we decided that I should write it, and I had a family meeting with the kids, and we discussed that this was a book for parents that could help them parent better kids like them, kids who had special needs and issues. And we had so many issues. The kids were excited about it. They got to choose their own names. And I was in Seattle 2 weeks ago doing a premiere of a horn concerto there. My son came, he's living in, one of my sons, he came, whom we will call Jason. That was his choice of name. And he came and in the after talk of the concerto, someone asked him, so have you read your mother's book? And he said, she told me I couldn't read it until I was 35. And I'm thinking, wow, of all the things I told you couldn't do until you were 35, that's the one you're gonna do. I sent them a text, came out, and the publishers, as an author, I've never done anything like this. I wrote a 10-page paper on the Brahms Horn Trio as a master's student and graduate student, and that's the longest thing I'd ever written before. So the publishers said, well, as the author, you get 5, we're gonna send you 5 copies, which I thought, oh, again, poetry, thanks for that. All right, so I'm gonna start, we picked these love, limits, and laughter sort of topic headings to sort of touch on these things that were takeaways. It could have been like 14 other alliterations of camping, cousins, cooking, you know, that sort of thing. It was a full court press, and if you read the book, you'll see that it was nonstop. But we chose love, limits, and laughter. Thank you, Catherine, she helped me with that. And I thought, well, all right, if nothing else, I hope you get your Ellsworth. Did I just do that? So sorry. I'm going to start with the various kinds of love. I am so sorry. Well, and here's the thing. If we can't laugh about it, it gets really dark really fast. The subject of the victimization of children is devastating. These are lives and generations that are affected by such a thing. And when I did this, one of my uncles, my mother's brother, told me, he said, Anne, you are throwing a rock into the pond, that these will be for generations. This is an intervention that you're doing, and you won't know, even in your own kids' lives until 40, 50 years out, what the effects will be, but we were making a decision to intervene. It was really that. Love in the family. My husband and I want to talk about these various kinds of love and maybe read some excerpts from the book if that's all right, and then leave plenty of time for questions. I'm mostly interested in answering your questions about what is interesting to you. So there is, it was a deepening of my love with my husband. We'd both been married before. We were both very involved in our careers and experts at living it alone. And he was from South Dakota and talked to me a lot in our courting days about interdependence, and I was not interested. He talked about living in the plains where the temperature gets so low that you need to check on your neighbors or they will not, they might not make it if someone's heat went out. Talked about being in the Marine Corps, esprit de corps. Talked about living on a boat, which he did, and we both did in the New York Harbor. That in a marina, you watch each other's water line and this and that. I'm like, not interested, not moving to South Dakota. What else have you got? He said, we need to do something that neither one of us could do on our own. And okay, that makes sense in terms of us coming together as a couple. There wasn't a lot of need going on in my life. I had my own apartment, I had a great career, I was kind of loving it. But also, again, it came to that point where we both knew how to get divorced. We both knew how to recover from something like that. What neither of us had done was be in a successful marriage. Well, so here we were, and it was absolutely a team. This is how I describe it as in the book. Our division of labor fell clearly along our individual strengths, and we assumed our different roles without discussion. I was the boots on the ground, knee-deep in mud and minutia. His was an aerial view, infrared. He could see around corners, warn me of sneak attacks from the rear, and call the ambush before it happened. He had the forest, I had the trees. We were in constant communication. Dan, I have a situation here. In 8 words or less, he would make the call. Isolate Jason, pull Ruby close, redirect Susie. Copy that. As the stress of our family life grew to radioactive levels, my friends and family were very concerned about the toll it was taking on our marriage. How are you guys doing? Like, how's it going with Dan? And honestly, we were, over these years, have grown closer than we ever were before. I describe it in the book as the children and their relationship with Dan. They loved their dad. They waited for him every day to come home from work and play with them. I would stand on the porch and watch them with Dan chasing after them, grabbing their legs, dropping to the grass and rolling towards them, over them, under them. They're laughing and screaming, fusing into a single warbling shrill of excitement. Male parental investment at this level is a total turn-on. I would just stand there, watching him play, falling in love with this part of my husband I had never met, this paternal man, the father of my children. The only problem was that he did have a full-time job, and while we were in Manhattan, which was a very short time, I was with the 2 kids for 4 months. We actually got the other 3. And that is a journey through the Administration for Children's Services in New York City. Wow. One-word review. Wow. But my brother was running flying wingman for me during that time because things were already spooling out of control. My son, Jimmy, we got him when he was 8, and he couldn't believe it. He thought he was 9. I'm 8? I'm 8? I'm like, yeah, we've got yeah, you are 8. He was struggling in his transition, and actually, if I could read a little bit about that. He was a bedwetter, as was I, as a kid, and he was struggling in school. He was very bright, but if he didn't understand something, he would immediately get very depressed, slide onto the floor, and just not get back up, and sometimes cry. At one point, he came home, and one of his teachers had called and said that he wasn't doing well. He wasn't doing his reading, and she called, and he was there when she was telling me this. And we walked home. He was very upset. He got home and he took his belt off, and he said, "Now you're going to punish me?" "No, I'm not going to punish you, Jimmy. I'm not going to do that. We just got to spend more time on the work. No big, moving on." And no, he started trying to hit his own feet. His feet, took off his shoes, and I said, "Sweetie, we're not doing this." And I took the belt away, and things really escalated very quickly. And over the next days, as a guardian, we weren't legally adopted yet, but as a guardian of these children, it's my job to keep them safe. And the moment is, are they a danger to themselves or others? And that was a reality we lived with constantly. And I see my first tutor, Tommy Johnson, came in. Thank you, Tommy. This guy knows what I'm talking about. These are, actually a lot of people have suggested that Tommy and I have a trauma bond from what we went through. at one point he's struggling with me, and I'm trying to talk him down. Take it easy, Jimmy. And swinging wildly, he hit my chin with his head and grabbed one of his heavy new dress shoes. We bought them all new clothes, suits. And he loved his suit. He'd wear it to school all the time. He loved it. He took one of his dress shoes and brought it down as hard as he could on the bridge of my nose. And my head exploded in pain, and I actually saw stars. I had never been hit before. Sure, I had bumped my nose on things, been injured while playing sports or roughhousing with a sibling, but no one had ever hit me with the intent to hurt. I was in shock. We were both on the floor at this point, and I rolled Jimmy over on his stomach and lay across his back. I just lay there a minute, trying to take all this in. He was struggling and crying. It's okay, Jimmy, I said. I'm not going to hurt you, but I can't let you behave like this. Safety first, my man, safety first. I was shaking, my nose throbbing, and the pressure in my sinuses spreading like fire to my cheekbones and forehead. I called my brother, who lived in the apartment below mine. I need you to meet Ruby's bus and bring her up here. I'm having a situation. I could hear him running down the stairs in the hallway as he answered, can do. I was holding Jimmy down, and when John and Ruby walked into the back room, I didn't get up. Hi, babe, I said to Ruby while still on the ground. Thanks, Uncle John, for bringing her up. How was school, sweetie? Do you want a snack? Jimmy's having some issues. I'm not hurting him, but I can't let him up right now. Can you grab an apple and then come on back? Let's get started on that homework. Jimmy kept struggling. I just lay there across his back smiling as if everything were normal. Ruby was a face watcher, and she was taking her cue from me. Was everything okay? I winked at her. Ruby sat down next to me, and we did her homework. Good, now don't forget to carry the one. Excellent. Next one. Jimmy struggled for maybe 30 minutes before exhausting himself and falling asleep. Things just continued to spool up from there, and I would have to walk Jimmy back and forth to school, and this is just the last part of that. Every morning on our way to school, Jimmy and I passed an old limo driver sitting in his black town car, parked watching us. On my walk back home, I could see his eyes following me in his rearview mirror. He never said anything, never smiled or waved, just watched me daily, failing over and over to connect with my new son. One day, the driver rolled down his window and waved me over here. Here we go. New Yorkers love giving advice. I've been told how to lock my bike, how to parallel park, how to vote, walk a dog, and how to blank myself. And now it appeared I was going to be told how to parent. Excuse me, ma'am. I stopped and I stood back a safe distance from his window. I was in a defensive stance and had already close to tears. I've been watching you work with that boy for over 2 months now. I don't know who you are or what your relationship is to him, but this morning, God told me to tell you, never give up on that boy. Keep working with him. I started crying. Thank you, sir. He added, my name's Aaron. I nodded, thank you, Aaron. The boy's name is Jimmy. I'm Ann, his adoptive mother. I don't know about God speaking to Aaron, but I could believe Aaron speaking to me. He set a bar for me I could meet. I just had to keep working and never give up. And of all the things when we started this that I had hoped that I could give to these children, the things that I felt were my strength, the bag I packed mentally and emotionally as we started into this process. I read every book there was. I could do this. The thing that all these things that I felt like I had to offer, the thing that in the end was stamina. It was just that. It was never giving up, being the last one, following through on every consequence for every limit we set, and yeah. These kids needed a parent. They didn't need me. They didn't need anyone with my background, my education. This, our story is actually not unique. I think the thing that makes it interesting is that I was in my 40s and I had no children of my own. I had no experience with it, and that I was just coming from such a different perspective and such a different world than most of the people who are out there adopting special needs kids, who are fostering well, who are saving these kids' lives. And the other thing that makes it different is that I wrote it down, but I don't want you to think that we're alone in doing this. Ours was a very extreme story, which makes it read almost like fiction. Like I couldn't make this stuff up. I couldn't believe it was happening. But there are so many good people out there doing this every day, and they were an enormous source of strength for me. There's some stories of people in the book as well. So that was about my brother, actually. And my sister came. She helped us through moving us up to upstate New York. And then my love from my siblings, my parents, my whole family rallied around me. And that's on the end. I knew that even if my stamina failed, they would not let me fail. And they did not. There were moments, and they all arrived and did the things that I couldn't do while I was running around chasing these kids and trying to keep them safe. There's the maternal love, and that was very complicated for my kids. I'll just mention something from the book. My kids cry. I miss my real mom, and I comfort them. I know you do. I would too. How confusing for a little heart, needing to attach to someone, unable to love in the present tense, worried that feeling close to me would be a betrayal of their biological mom. The older kids can remember their moms, kind of. The younger, too, have no memory at all. What is it they long for? Is it love? The idea of love? Maybe I have it all wrong. Maybe their longing is love. Loving these children is easy for me. There's no mystery there. We love the things we care for. Is my love the same love as the bio moms feel? The same love that my mother feels for me? I don't know. Does it matter? Love is a lot of different things and many things at once. It can spring up organically, uncontrolled and wild. It can be a decision, a seed we plant and water. I used to tell my adopted kids, I love you, meaning I am caring for you, feeding and protecting you. I was love, the action verb. And the more I cared for them, the more this love acted on me. It's different now. There's a cool down song I sing to the kids at night about love, how it is sometimes hard to tell where one end loves and another begins. It's a John Prine song, actually. And the editors had to cut it because after a couple of words, then they have to do like some sort of thing. But it's a beautiful song. If love should come your way, you learn to say, I love you. These children want to be with their birth mothers. Of course they do. It wasn't my choice to remove them, and it certainly wasn't theirs. But here we are, and love is love. It has its own life. It is working inside of us, having its way. We look for words, we feel it, we soften. We are learning to say, I love you. When we talk about limits in parenting, we're generally talking about the limits we set for our children to make them safe. And believe me, we ran a very tight ship. There was a consequence for everything. We followed through. They needed it. It was hyperstructure. It was everything parenting normally is 1,000 times more. And at the moment where this thing would cost me, I'd think, really, Anne? Okay, so cost to me at this moment where I'm just exhausted and I feel like doing anything but being patient and seeing this through, I would weigh that cost to me versus the benefit to that child, and it was 1,000 to 1. There's no contest. I had, they were all, when we adopted them, they were all past their formative years. Joey was 5.5. He was the youngest, but 7. Their brains had been mapped and formed around trauma, and they needed a hyperstructure for that. But I don't want to talk about those limits. I want to talk about my limits in the context of me as a mother. I was 43, and I had the benefit of having self-knowledge and understanding my strengths, but even more importantly, my limits. This is from the book. People would always say to me, 5 kids, I don't know how you do it. I get it. It's a figure of speech. A way for people to acknowledge that what I'm doing is difficult without actually having to imagine it. But they do know. People know how I do it. They just don't want to go there. Like the Donner Party, surviving 3 months in the Sierras, giving birth in a cab, or winning a hot dog eating contest. We all kind of know what's involved. We just don't want to think about it. However, for someone living these scenarios, survival is in the details. 5 kids, how do you do it? Me? Seriously? I have an amazing partner. Sensible footwear, abundant health, and for the first 43 years of my life, I pretty much did everything I wanted to. I also went to New York City one day a week to teach, rehearse, and play music. I called it every child left behind. They hated it when I left, and they loved it when I came back. Mom, you're always in such a good mood. You're so much nicer. It was, I think they could understand how that would happen. I want to talk about my tutors. Adopting more children than I had hands was an issue from the get-go. Even with 2 kids, I couldn't contain them. And I had to have live-in help. And they were young people mostly, like Tommy, who were taking time off from school to help us. I was honest and posted ads like, this is a job, this is terrible pay, there's enormous parental presence, it's a terrible job, but an amazing calling, which it was. And we called it the reign of the tutors. When we started homeschooling, we had as many as 3 living with us at a time. This again was me knowing when to ask for help, knowing that I could not do it alone. And for me to go down or to come to the edge of my patience or anything like that was not good for the kids. Put your own oxygen mask on first. That's what the sign says, and they do it for a reason. It's not intuitive. We want to give everything, but you can't. You can't give what you don't have. I don't know. We've had about 30 or so tutors since Tommy joined us, and I'm in touch with most of them. And I don't know if you guys are kidding or not when you tell me about the Fox Family Support Group, the tutor survival, to get together. But I do know that it is hard for the people who lived with us to talk to people about it. It's hard for them to relate. Let's move on to laughter. Humor is very important, and it should be taken very seriously. That's a joke. Okay, after about 6 months together, things got very dark in our house. We learned that the level of trauma and abuse our kids had suffered in foster care was far greater than we had originally thought. I was in love with them by that point, which had also not been in my plan. Oops. And the news devastated me. I cried, I fell into despair, and my husband let me play that out for about 2 minutes. We didn't have a lot of time for our own reflection. And he said, from now on, keep them laughing. And that was our new mandate. Copy that. I had weighed heavily which of my comedic devices would be most effective in fulfilling this keeping them laughing mandate. Rough housing was out. I couldn't engage the children physically in the way that Dan could. I wasn't strong enough and was already being attacked daily. Scatological humor, arguably the highest form of humor, had always been my go-to. But I decided to pass, fearing the children were too young to navigate that fine line between sophistication and vulgarity. Besides, Anthony, our youngest, was already working that angle. With his nightly bathroom reports, we'd come back to the dinner table and announce, big, big, or my personal favorite, raisins. I decided to go with crazy mom. I started flipping pancakes and French toast at them from 8 feet away. No, Mom, no. Already airborne. Oops, too late. I told them I was training their reflexes, grabbing plates, lunging, screaming, and scrambling. They always managed to catch them. As the children would come into the kitchen, they'd find me talking on a banana as if it were a phone. I'd wink, yeah, why, yes, she just walked in. Hold on. It's for you. And at first they rolled their eyes, and then they started playing along. Hello? Yes, this is Susie. Yes, I agree, she's completely crazy. I put M&Ms on the broccoli and sausage pizza. Mom, you don't put candy on pizza. I looked concerned. What are you talking about? I would play popular music in the car as we'd drive, and I'd start nodding my head and doing the slow shimmy while driving safely. Mom, you're embarrassing us. Stop. Perfect. Next, I would gently pump the brakes in time to the music as we would approach a stop sign. The laws of physics making movers of them all. Mom! I'd say, Jimmy's dancing. What's the problem? Jimmy, sitting in the back seat, stone-faced, was trying not to smile as his head and torso pulsed back and forth. He's feeling the power of the music. Go, Jimmy. Laundry was a limitless source of material. Mom, have you seen my pink hoodie? I would come upstairs either wearing the item, way too tight, and hand them a pair of Anthony's underwear. Here you go. Or if the request was underwear related, I would put the underwear on my head and shrug, can't find it. I would throw soft things at them, animals, socks, loaves of bread. After checking in on them in their rooms at night, I would kiss them and then leave the room through their closet door. I'd wink at them before closing the door. a cup of tea in my hand, and I'd shut the door, I'd wait for about a minute, and then come back out looking embarrassed and try and sneak out. The only thing better than getting a kid laughing is having them get you laughing. To positively affect an adult is a hugely empowering experience for a kid. I encourage them to make me laugh, tell me knock-knock jokes, make animal sounds, setting them up for one-liners, and if their worst jokes didn't work, I would just moan and start laughing anyway. Humor made the good times better, the bad times shorter. After a violent outbreak, a joke was better than a hug. You're a good kid, Jason. You just have to get past this behavior. You're smart, you're funny, smelling. He'd laugh, Mom! I teased him, I didn't mean that. I mean, you're funny looking. I didn't always feel like giving hugs after an hour of restraining them and them biting and hitting me. A joke was more honest. It said, everything is okay. And you know what? Everything is okay. We've got 5 of our kids, they're all at risk for entering adulthood and independence. We're all still standing, we're all still here. We're in touch with all of them. My husband just retired from the FBI in January, and I've taken a teaching position at Lawrence University in Appleton, Wisconsin, where children of faculty can go for free. They told me about the tuition waiver before I told them about the kids. And could potentially bankrupt them. Dan and I are in touch with all the kids. They know we love them and that we are a family and will always be here for them. It was a defining decision of my life. I feel the exposition coming back, and I have truly been transformed. My relationship with music has completely changed. I'm not the player I was physically, but the stuff I'm doing is much more interesting and, if I can use the word, real. It's a trick for musicians. We spend a lot of time in the practice room, and then we're supposed to go and say something about the human experience and connect with this amazing art form. But if your experience is only in the practice room, it's not, it's changed. I'd like to answer questions you may have now for me. It's hard to tell you everything in the book without telling you everything in the book. But, and some of you have read it, and some of you haven't, but if there's one suggestion I could make, I would love it if someone would ask me how I actually wrote this book. I would love to answer that, but I'd also like to hear the questions you have. Thank you. Thanks. I'm a musician, and I am convinced that music is the ultimate transferable skill set. All my kids learned music. That was one of the most therapeutic. The concept of music therapy to me is redundant. It was the most amazing thing for them. And so I started writing down these little things that happened. I was just basically journaling, recording these ideas. Not ideas, just things that happened. And I was actually listening to video tapes of myself talking, because I didn't have time to write when I was experiencing these things. 2 years after the event happened, I would watch the video, and I'm just completely scrambling. And I'm thinking, how's she going to get out of this? I have no idea how to. And I was so glad that I had made those short recordings while it was happening. But so I started organizing these pieces, and I didn't have a clue about how to organize them. My brother was reading these little vignettes every day. And then one day he didn't write, he didn't answer. I'd send him a little chapter or something. And he said, I can't read it, and I'm so depressed. It's too much. And I thought, wow, right, okay. So how do we tell the story without bogging down? And I thought of the master of the form, J.S. Bach. And he wrote a piece called the Goldberg Variations. And it was a commission by a man who was very ill, and an enormous pain and had trouble sleeping. And he asked Bach to write him a piece that could be played for him at night to help calm him, help him back to sleep, and distract him from this pain. And I thought, well, how appropriate is that? Very. But it's also a theme in variations, and it begins with an aria, and then it has 30 variations that go in a cycle of 3. There's a canon, there's a genre piece, there's an arabesque, and it continues. And so the Goldberg variations just kind of start and go, and they're all in G major except for 3 that are in minor. And so I opened the score and I wrote the book to the Goldberg variations. I gave each child a canon. I gave each problem for the parents as a genre piece. The ones that were so difficult were I set them to the pieces that had hand crossings that are so difficult that we could not have done them ourselves. And then and each one I had in 4 sections, because I just did it almost verbatim, to the point that I actually started each chapter by writing a lyric to the tune itself. You wet the bed, not to worry, Bobby. I also used to wet the bed along with many other And it was very interesting because it kind of helped me dictate the pace of that chapter, the consonants, the articulation, and even the word length. Some of the, comfort zone, they want to know if we would be okay with the behaviors, listen here, reload, And then I could just go, and then I didn't have it's getting started. And so, yeah, music, sorry, that's how I did it. And the editor's like, we have never seen this before. What even is this form? And they said, but it kind of works. And I'm like, really, you think? 300 years later, Goldberg variations, I'm sure most of you know that piece. It's incredible. Anyway, that's how I did it. Thanks for asking.
So, I think it's a terrific book about that each one of us can find something about life that we didn't realize in before. One particular quote I would like you to elaborate on a little bit, and that's when you found the note that said from one of your children, Anne is a terrible mother.
Yes, the worst mom ever. And it was it was on an index card made out of a black Sharpie, and it had a heart that was broken and a knife sticking in it, and then red drips. And it was fantastic because reactive attachment disorder, that would be textbook reactive attachment disorder behavior. Bobby and I had felt close. We'd come close together, and I'd read Where the Red Fern Grows to them, and because I wanted them to know that it was okay to cry. And I was also, in the textbooks, you can't cry when a child tells you, discloses something about an abuse. And you may feel sad, you may want to go to them, but they need you to stay strong. They need you to have a controlled anger towards the perpetrator and understanding that this will never happen again, not on my watch. And I followed that, but I also wanted them to know it was okay to cry. So I had read The Red Fern Grows, and sure enough, that good dog, Dan, when he dies, we read it on a family road trip. Remember? And Dad, we had to pull the car over. You and Dad everyone's bawling, So I knew it would work. And so we read it every day, and here comes that part, and I'm with Jimmy and Ruby, and I just start crying, and they're like, I'm like, is this weird to see me crying? And they're like, yeah, it's kind of, I said, it's just part of living, it's okay. Anyway, Bobby comforted me, and as did Ruby, and I was just saying, it's part of living. This is how we're sad, and this is how we help get it out. And and within a day, I get this note on my horn case. He leaves it. She's the worst mom ever. And I'm like, yes, victory. Like, he is feeling close to me. Now he's trying to push me away, and before I can do that to him, but I won't. And then we're going to break this cycle. And then we're starting a new cycle, a positive cycle, where I'm just going to be consistently loving and present. But yeah, that was, and thank goodness for textbooks, because I might have felt like he was actually saying I was the worst mom ever. So, yes.
Did you use therapists at all?
Oh my goodness.
Or are they provided for you as when you do foster care like this, or are you getting any support from the institution?
The state, absolutely,
And
yes.
you just read books, or did you talk to people? Or?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I read all those books before we did this, but nothing like this, nothing. And I wish that I had. I'm not going to say it would have dissuaded me. I would have been smarter had I read a book like this. I think adopting a large sibling group like that all at once is difficult. But yes, the state, the kids all had Medicaid, and 2 of the boys have Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. And they were all diagnosed as special needs, which can also just mean in foster care that they're over 6 years old. Or a sibling group be considered special needs because they cannot be placed. It's very hard to place more than one kid at a time. And I get it, I see why. And yes, we called them feeling doctors in the same way that we had our teeth doctors. And we had this leg doctors for the Duchenne's boys who would help with the pain in their legs. And there's another, but yes, I did so much trauma therapy and CBT with the kids, cognitive behavioral therapy. I was basically going 8 times a week. We pulled them out of school, and I would go with them because the mother is the most difficult relationship for them to have. And in fact, there's a story in the book of when the therapy institution where we were going, behavioral health services, they're like, yeah, well, there's a wait list, but maybe something will open up, you know? So at a certain point, I filled out the paperwork. I'm like, we're not we're in crisis. So I called the office and I said, okay, so you can see us within 24 hours, or I'm calling 911 and then you will have to see us within 24 hours, and I'm not threatening you. She said, well, okay, you know, when I put it that way, maybe we just have a new person coming in, we might be able to fit you in, one of them like next week. And I said, terrific, I'll call back on Monday, and can you tell me the name of this therapist? Darcy Mason. So, and then I said, thank you, and whatever, I called back. Ring, ring, hello? Yes, hello, may I speak to Darcy Mason? Yes, just a moment. And they put me through, and I'm like, hi, Darcy. I have this child, she's 7, she needs to see a feeling doctor now. She's in crisis, do you know what I mean? I gave her the overview, and Darcy's like, oh my, you know, she's a trauma therapist, she's like, yeah, I'll see you this afternoon. And then she saw us the next day, and a lot of the kids were going twice a week, but one of them every week. And, but that was an example of advocacy and also asking for help. Absolutely, absolutely. And then I did stop reading. I have not read a book in 11 years. I simply could not. I was just, I was a terrible friend. I was a terrible colleague. The only thing I was doing at that point was parenting and playing my instrument, because that actually made me a better parent. It was a time that I practiced in the middle of the night from midnight to 2:30. I'd wake up and get the bedwetters out. I'd take them to the bathroom, put them back to bed, and then I'd go and practice till 1:30 or 2, and the kids remember that. They heard that. They knew I was there. I was still awake. Yes?
Did you originally want to foster, or were you always intending to adopt? And I take it the original 2 were advocating for the next 3, but how did you come to decide, hey, let's...
Foster care.
Yeah.
Well, everyone has advice. There's a chapter in there called the Industrial Adoptive Complex, where you're just like, wow, whoa. And this process has as much to do with parenting as getting a book published has to do with writing. There's like a complete disconnect, you know. It's a completely different process. But when it was my husband who looked into foster care, and I was like, whoa, that is so hardcore. Like wow, you know. And I said, I've just heard horror stories about that. He said, yeah, but that's where the need is. Once we'd gotten to the point where we were trying to give something to someone, and it became that issue, I had to agree that it would be hard, yes, but he said it's so much harder for them. And we would look on these, you know, these websites, and there's so many kids out there, so many kids. And after getting close to people who had an early disruption in their lives, and seeing what the cost of that is, 70% of the homeless people in New York have timed out of foster care. There were 2,500 in New York alone, and kids who are over 2, that nobody, it's really difficult. They have a lot of issues. So I don't know if I answered that question. But I will say what got us thinking about adoption in the first place was a nephew of mine. It was at a family reunion. My cousins had adopted a child with cerebral palsy, and they ran a program for college students down in Ecuador just to work at orphanages there, not necessarily for adoption. And I was talking to he's my second cousin, my mom's brother's daughters. You know how it is. These kids are remember like fax pages, like, oh, I'm 4 of 7, he was 2 of 5, that sort of thing. But he'd gone down to Ecuador to see these kids in the orphanages, and I said, how'd it go, man? How was your summer traveling? He's like, it was great. This guy can't hold his head up. He's he's confined to a wheelchair. It was great, he said, but it was also kind of intense. He said, I see these kids down there, and they have the one thing, I have the one thing that they really want. I have parents. He said, I don't think we can know what it's like not to have parents. And I was just thinking, wow, dang. Like, if this kid can feel compassion for these orphans down there. And he told me his adoption story about when he was an infant, but his father decided that, yes, this is my son. I'm going to drive out to Seattle and get him. It was just so much pride in belonging to someone. And I think that's what tipped it for Dave and me when my second cousin told me that story, 12-year-old kid. I love the idea of us being able to have a style or have it, and people would ask me like, do you miss New York? I'm like, what? I don't have, what? It was triage. It was like on the fly. We had no agenda. Obviously we read a lot, et cetera. We had basically common sense, but the parenting issues we were dealing with were so wow that we were only interested in the product, like what's going to work, what's going to get us to this next step, and it wasn't always intuitive, and we were just watching and trying to stay ahead of them. Dave was a former Marine. The concept of the OODA loop, where you get in someone's, we were trying to figure out what was motivating these kids, how we could turn them. There was no time, we did not argue. We argued maybe twice, but it was just because we were so tired. We were absolutely at our best, and I have to say that was the most amazing thing about this experience, is how we came together. These kids brought out the best in me. They needed it. Brought out the best in our tutors. I still have tutors who call and say, will I ever have that again? That sense of purpose, that sense, I was so valued. I had to be so strong. That was Kelsey Sears, she called. And it was just that. Everyone rose to this occasion. Everyone wanted them to do well. Everyone wanted to see this work, because we were doomed. We were the recipe for this. The professionals were like, what are you thinking? What are you thinking? And we weren't. It was an emotional decision, but it was the right decision, and we felt that really strongly. So no, if Dan and I had the time to sit down and discuss parenting styles instead of like, oh my gosh, where's it? That'd just be wonderful. We probably would have taken a nap instead. I don't know. To actually, these conversations were so fast, and and these decisions, and there was a lot of trust there, and we really did our skill set. Our responsibilities fell directly in line with our skill set. He didn't teach the music lessons, I did. Yeah.
You mentioned their desire they're missing their mother.
Yes.
Did any of them have any connections, or now have any connections with their mother? Was that totally out?
No, it was not totally out. They were closed adoptions because the legal rights had been terminated, and these kids had been cleared for years, 2.5+ years, and after we were legally adopted, I actually tried to contact the parents so that I could send pictures to them through a a post office box. Do you know what I mean? Like no contact. The therapists were adamant about that. There can be no contact. They're not ready. And now we have found the parents of the older two, and one has gone and spent a Christmas with the mother, and the other one has not made any contact at all. And it's a big question they have to answer, and I'm sure that they probably will. We haven't found the second mother yet, and we all had different dads, but of course, and I still think of those women all the time. And I've spoken to the mother of the one that we found, and she's lovely, and she's appreciative of what we did. And our daughter was reaching out a lot more after that also. We're connected now. I am with that mother, but.
I've known Anne for 10 years now, since when she first adopted these kids, and you can see, I think, from the way she talks and the way, and her music, that she's just one of the most creative people you've ever seen, that all this stuff just flows out of her and drips out of her. And the ability to be creative is directly connected with your ability to be vulnerable and connect with people and love people. And I just think that that just seeing all of the things that have happened over the past 10 years, what she's gone through, what she's given all of her kids and everyone that she's been in contact with is been one of the most life-changing things I've ever seen, because it's the closest example that I think I could ever think of or will ever see of just true unconditional love. And so Anne is just a really remarkable person, so I just wanted to
Thank you.